Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about graphical and tabular functions and finding the value in those different forms, the graphical and tabular form. So in example 1, we're going to give you a function f of x that's a graph, and we're going to give you g of x in a table. Notice f of x here is made up of several different parts of different functions. We call this type of function a piecewise function. Not that you have to remember that now, but we will study piecewise functions later on in the year. So this will give you a kind of an introduction on what a piecewise is and what it looks like. So how do I find, or what do I look for when I find f of 2? Well, to start with, it's going to tell us what function to work with. So we're working in the f function. So notice here, it's labeled as f of x, and we'll find f of 2. In order to find f of 2, they're telling us that x equals 2. So we're going to do the x-axis at 2, and we're going to go up or down on that vertical line to see where we touch the graph. Notice that we have 2 different points. So there's 2 different types of representation here. If you recall from Algebra 1, when we did inequalities, an open circle meant not inclusive, or we couldn't touch it. But a solid circle meant that we could touch it. So we're going to be looking for the solid circle or the solid line that crosses when x equals 2. So the value of f of 2, we say, is 3. To find g of 4, again, it's telling us that x equals 4. So if x equals 4 in the g function, then our value is 3 there as well. Part C is going to ask us to do a couple different things. It's telling us to take 2 times f of negative 1 and add to it 3 times g of 7. So what I kind of like to do is go ahead and write it out. So f of negative 1. So again, we come to the f function, come over here to x equals negative 1, and we're coming up to the graph, and that point is going to be x equals 1. Or sorry, y equals 1. So the value of f of negative 1 is 1. To that, we're going to add 3 times g of 7. g of 7, again, x equals 7. We go to our table. The value of g of x then is 4. So now we can go ahead and add those together. So we have 2 times 1 plus 3 times 4 gives us 14. For f of 1 divided by g of 5, f of 1, again, notice we have 2 points of interest. We have a solid circle and an open circle. We're interested in that solid circle only. So f of 1 is 1. And we're going to divide that by g of 5. g of 5, again, x equals 5. We come over to 2. So the value of f of 1 divided by g of 5 is 1/2. Here we have a composite function for part E, g of f of 1. Well, f of 1, again, we found that before. f of 1 is 1. So we're looking for g of 1. Replacing that f of 1 with 1. So g of 1, again, x equals 1. So the g value of 1 is 3. In part F, we're looking for f of g of 7. So g of 7 is 4. So we're going to replace that g of 7 with 4. So now we're looking for just f of 4. Now we go to the f function. 4, we come up. Looks like it's going to touch that point there. So we have 4. In part G, it asks us what values does f of x equal 1. So if you recall, f of x just means y equals 1. So it's asking us what x values does y equal 1. So if I come over here to my f function, here I can draw in a horizontal line to see where I intersect this graph. I'm going to see that I'm going to intersect twice at negative 1 and when x equals 1. So I'm going to intersect at x equals negative 1 and 1. Those are my x values where y equals 1. I have one more example, example 2 there. Again, we're going to do the same thing, just 2 different graphs, or a different graph in a different table. Again, here's our graph of f of x, and it doesn't have to be labeled as f of x. It could be h of x, j of x, whatever. Just make sure that you're noticing what function we're working with. You may want to put a box around it or circle it or do something so your eyes go to the f of x or the g of x. So f of 0. f of 0, okay, notice we have the solid circle and the open circle again. We're interested in a solid circle, so f of 0 is -1. G of 5. Well, if I come over here to my x values of 5, I don't have an x value. We don't know what's happening in there. It could be anything. So we say g of 5 is undefined at this point in time. Now later on we'll be able to come up with some values, some predictions of what we think it could be, but at this point in time we're going to say it's undefined. Part C, we're looking for g of f of -2. So f of -2, I go to the f function, I come over to -2, come down, looks like we're at -1. So we're looking for g of -1. G of -1, we come to the table, and that equals 2. F of 4 plus g of 3 for part D. F of 4, we come over to 4, we come up, we're touching at 1. So we're gonna have 1 plus g of 3. Again, undefined. So 1 plus an undefined, so that's gonna make our overall sum undefined because we don't know what it is. Part E, what values of x is f of x equal to g of x? Good gracious. Well, if we think f of x has got a lot of points to work with. G of x has very few points. So I would suggest that we come over here to the g of x table, see what our values are to see if they are equal over here. So when x equals -1, g of x equals 2. So if I come over here to -1, it's not going to equal 2, so we know that that one's not going to work. So we could cross that one out if we want. When x equals 2, g of x equals 7, so they're not going to equal either. So what we're looking for is these points to coincide. 4 and 2. Come over here to 4. If we go up 2, so it's very close, but again, not going to work for us. 7 and 8. Notice this graph here is going to go up, but it's going up ever so slightly. There's no way that it's going to make it up to 8. And 10, way out here at -1. Again, that's increasing. It's not going to make it there. So there are no values. No values for which f of x equals g of x. Now, a nice question I could ask on a test or a quiz is create a point in the table of g of x such that f of x equals g of x. So what could we put in here? Well, we could put in the point right here. How about 1, 0? If I were to put in the point 1, 0, then f of x and g of x would equal. And there is a multitude of points that we could do that for. So it's kind of an open-ended question that we could ask on a test or a quiz. Finally, part F, we have 2 times 3f of 1s minus 2g of f of -4. Say that 3 times fast. I know some of you are trying it. That's okay. Try away. So we have 3f of 1. F of 1 is 0 minus 2 g of f of -4. F of -4 is 2. So we have 2. 3 times 0, that's nice, that's 0. Minus 2g of 2. G of 2 is 7. So we have 2 times 7 there. So we have 2, 0 minus 2 times 7 gives us -14. 2 times -14 is -28, if my pen can write today. And that's going to give us our value. And that gives you an idea of a graphical and tabular look to our functions and finding the values of them. Good luck!